And I have prepared some things here, which I'm not going to tell you about now.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. And I've prepared some things there.
Yes. Playfulness is part of the struggle.
So welcome to the Café con Paulo Freire podcast, Coffee with Paulo Freire. I am here with Azril and I'm Daniel Mosberg. Work with education and outreach at CEMUS, the Center for Environment and Development Studies, here at Uppsala University in Uppsala, Sweden. And we're doing our first episode this autumn, 2025. And we're coming back to Paulo Freire, the work of Paulo Freire, the pedagogics of Paulo Freire, and Paulo Freire as a political activist in his time. Azril, do you want to also say a couple of words about yourself?
I am celebrating life after 2 years of high-risk surgery. I didn't know if I was going to come out alive. I was curious to see if there is life after life, so I have to wait a bit for the next and final chance to find out. So with Freire, it's a long, it's like prehistorical times. 69 is when we started to work with Freire in the context of the what Eric Hobsbawm called the peculiar revolution in Peru from 68 to 74, 75. And then Paulo Freire was advising the Minister of Agriculture with his famous literacy method that became known throughout the world. And in particular, I was working with peasant education in the context of agrarian reform. And then Freire came to us. He had come with a mission, United Nations, FAO, in terms of training about 500,000 families, multiplied by 5, 6, 7, 8 children per family. And he, very rapidly said, you need to use mass media in dialogical ways. And then he left. So we had a task, and we did create a model called Peasant Radio Forum that has not been much written about. There was a thesis by an Uruguayan student, Irene Sica, that worked later on for FAO. So we actually managed to approach the use of mass media, collective media, using the radio because it's accessible and cheap, with like study circles in Sweden or cultural círculos de cultura in the case of Northeast Brazil, in Recife, where he was working, and also with the Liga Campesina in Northeast Brazil. They call them cultural circles, but it's very similar to study circles. It's, you could say, more horizontal democratic approach to Paulo Freire today, with institution developments, organization developments, not quite my taste. It's become less horizontal, but I think in the Recife area, they still keep these study circles as a democratic approach to consciousness raising, pedagogic transforming. And it's interesting that Adorno from the Frankfurt School, when trying to say, what can we do to contest, to respond to Nazi, fascist indoctrination like we have today, again, surprisingly 100 years after. And he said it was a kind of, he didn't use Freire, but Freire was very much responding to this challenge by the Adorno and the Frankfurt Schule, which is liberating education from this kind of hate prejudices, this deeply ingrained conditioning to not think, to let others, experts, leaders, think for you.
I can't even remember the bits and pieces. How did this whole thing start? Do you remember the background story of who started the Coffee with Paulo Freire?
Yeah.
And where and who?
Yes.
Yes. Do you want to tell that story?
Yes. I was informed that people wanted to celebrate 100 years from his birth on May 2nd, 1957. This is difficult to forget because that's my birthday. So I commented, why don't we try to join? And you were positive. Some people said, it's Sunday. I said, well, we try anyway. And to our surprise, it was the start of a program that now lasts 4 years. We're in the fourth, moving to the fifth year. So.
And that whole story I remember, but was it Fernanda in Sao Paulo who started the whole name? Or where did the concept come from?
What happened is that this project, Coffee with Paulo Freire, had already started in Porto Alegre. That's the capital of Rio Grande do Sul, which is bordering with Uruguay, Argentina, south. They call them gauchos, like the Argentinian gauchos, and they drink mate and that stuff. And we didn't think at the beginning of joining this project. But then we thought, why not? And then the problem was language. And then Liana Borges, that is like a key person in this project, in downtown Porto Alegre. And then it became viral in the whole state, in the whole of Brazil, and then it became international. So today we have a popular education Coffee with Paulo Freire, international, in many countries. So we started in Sweden with the help of Fernanda, because she spoke English. She's doing beautiful work. And she was very kind to be our godmother and guide us, explain how it works. And she's been with us a few times. She's a teacher. She has actively contributed in different ways. For example, bringing the topic of mental health among teachers in Brazil, not only in Brazil, but also in Brazil, because at the time was the time of Bolsonaro. Yep, that's it. Now I go back to the beginning. I read that Bolsonaro publicly said that if he's elected president, he will burn Paulo Freire's books. Yes. And on that note, I said, it's like Hitler did with Hermann Hesse, and he was not Jewish, but he was not Nazi. That they would burn Jewish authors and things like that. And then was a protest. And my first protest was to write 3 different chapters in 3 different books about Freire in Denmark, in Sweden, and I don't remember the other one. In Greece. So in the beginning, it's, come on, you fascist Bolsonaro mixing religion, evangelism with politics, with corruption. And it was a set to affirm, no, even from this corner in the world, we're not going to let this happen. And then it's when we conversed, and it was a leap of faith, like Kierkegaard, and we're still going strong.
And it's also, I remember putting different people that had been important for CEMUS when CEMUS started, but also had continued to be important during mainly the 1990s, but maybe also later. And Paulo Freire's name was one of them, and also trying to connect them with celebrations that were international as well. So that's why Paulo Freire's name was on one of my lists, and that's when you reached out and said, like, it's 100 years. So it was some kind of cosmic alignment that also happened during that period, I think. But that's interesting also with the story. And now, because also we should like remember and highlight the people that started this. We did not come up with the name Coffee with Paulo Freire. It's not our idea, but we've done it here in Uppsala and also internationally online in English.
And we were incredibly lucky to get Chico Whittaker that started the design of the World Social Forum. We had Leonardo Boff. We have had amazing people in the world, but also in Brazil, in several countries. Mm-hmm. And from Sweden, it jumped to Athens. So they created Coffee with Paulo Freire in Athens with Christina. Mm-hmm. We should check how that is going.
Yeah. I rewatched the first, not episode of the podcast, but the first video we did when it was 100 years on that Sunday you mentioned. And I also watched almost all of it of the second episode we did, which was, I think, 2 hours and 14 minutes. So it's a very long session to be online. But in that second episode, there's also a presentation by Fernanda of the work that she's been doing. So that's online in there as well. But should we also come back then to the podcast and the kind of framing we did? Because this is something that I read and summarized when we had our first episode. So maybe we can come back to that as well. So this is what I put together for our framing of the podcast. And we also called it Café con Paulo Freire, Coffee with Paulo Freire, and Learning, Life and Liberation. So different keystones and what is important.
It's a powerful.
Yeah, it's a powerful. Start. Yeah. So this is what I wrote. Are you a teacher in search of more inclusive and democratic ways to engage your students? Armchair digital activist looking for real-world change-making processes and community? Or just curious about the connection between coffee, student-led education, Freire, and today's international emergencies? Then this is the podcast for you. And I think we've been very good in connecting back to different international emergencies or activism. We haven't in a while talked that much about the pedagogics of Paulo Freire or Paulo Freire, inspirations from Paulo Freire. We talked about action research this spring. We've talked to other people around pedagogics, but not so recently. So I think this episode is also about coming back to the pedagogics of Paulo Freire, Paulo Freire's work, and Paulo Freire also as a political activist in his time. So I think that's good. And I also prepared a couple of things. There's a clip here from a documentary that was not maybe so helpful, at least not for me. We can watch that at the end, I think. But I also prepared this, which are quotes from Paulo Freire's work that the Paulo Freire Institute has put together. And I've printed those, and I made it into this random thing. So... and we can mix this and edit this after we're done with this session. But I think maybe we should we jump into a quote?
Yes.
You pick one and I pick one.
Yes. Can I make a parenthesis?
Yes, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. I was thinking that today, being still September, and having had the World Day of Peace from the United Nations on the 21st, 23rd, of September, to link Paulo Freire with work for peace. How do we change a world of conflict and violence as we see it nowadays, towards a world of peace. In his terms, as a Latin American, Brazilian, different from other parts, other corners of the world, justice must be the ground for peace. So there's a connection with Sweden, because in '74 he got the UNESCO prize as a peace educator, and then from Paris he came to Sweden, and we had a meeting with him in Folkhögskolan in Sweden, and so there's a connection. There's actually other connections. Should I mention that one, or should we go for the game first?
No, go ahead with that.
Well, I'm sorting out papers and books, and I found something incredible. I found an interview with Paulo Freire's boss in the World Council of Churches, Walter Persson, Swedish liberation theologist. So he was, when Paulo Freire was in Geneva, when he was in exile from the coup in Chile, from Pinochet, 73, and then that gave him more international outlook, but also he became known, especially in Portuguese Africa. And this interview, done in 2008, has not been published. It's a premiere. We intend to publish it here at CEMUS and share it, of course, with our colleagues around the world, the Paulo Freire community, a little bit fragmented, but still a community with our own differences. And like, in every family, we have different versions, different narratives. So that's really, and Walter Persson is the one that introduced the term conscientização in Portuguese, conscientization in English, to medvetande görande pedagogik. And being a theologian and a Christian, he relates liberation theology and liberation pedagogics to a Christian view. Not the same as Bolsonaro's, for certain. So that will be subject for another meeting, discussion, maybe. But it's, I found it recently, and that's really good news. I still remember the interview, and Walter Persson saying then, 2008, Paulo Freire's Pedagogics, it's needed today more than ever. Well, if he would be alive, he would say the same about 2025.
I have to ask another thing that I forgot now as well. This illustration, this beautiful illustration, you got that from someone as well that made this. Is there a story around this one as well?
Yes. It happened we have now, I don't know how many years, more than 6, with Fridays for the Future. There's the climate movement started by Greta Thunberg in Sweden. She was a child, now she's a young lady. And there was a Brazilian there, and so we started to converse. And then I mentioned this project, Coffee with Paulo Freire, and he volunteered to send us this beautiful drawing that has become our logo in a way.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And from the distance of the camera, you can't really see, but it's different letters coming out of the watering thing. And the name is Jenin, or am I mispronouncing that?
I don't remember.
No, it says Jenin down there. So but it's a beautiful illustration, and it's
maybe we could put it in the next poster.
Yeah, it's always in the poster.
Yeah.
It's in there, but I changed the colors and not so much on the actual illustration. Okay, So now we've covered the introduction. We have covered where the concept of coffee or café with Paulo Freire comes from. Different inspirations in Brazil, so it's not us that came up with it. We have also the illustration that we have covered. Yes, now we can go over to this thing that I prepared. So once again, it's different quotes from different works of Paulo Freire. It's on a webpage on the Paulo Freire Institute. We'll put the link in the notes of this episode. And what I thought, in a very Paulo Freire, but also a very CEMUS way, to have this as a mini workshop for the two of us. We are not going to go through all the quotes. Don't worry, for those of you watching this. But and it's different aspects, different works of Paulo Freire. So I think it will cover different parts. And we'll have to improvise. Since I prepared this, you get to pick the first one, and I'll pick one after that. So, and you can just read it aloud.
Okay. So I'm going to read the quote. I was going to actually help to translate the Portuguese to English at the Paulo Freire Institute. This is before I left. So one cannot expect positive results from an educational or political action program which fails to respect the particular view of the world held by the people. Such a program constitutes cultural invasion, good intentions notwithstanding. Pedagogy of the oppressed.
And do you want to say something about that or respond to that? Or
yes, I could just make a fast reflection. Shoot from the waist, as they used to say.
That's what we're doing here. Now we're trying to improvise. And we're also trying to put each other on the spot here. Usually we're okay with that.
So basically what he's saying is that to make sense with education, with political action for education programs or programs of political education, is that we need to acknowledge, pay attention, respect the particular view of the world that every person, that people has, so that we tune, we respond, we're in dialogue as equals with the people. With the people is still an abstraction. With each and one of the persons that constitute the collective, the people. If we are not able to connect one-to-one with each person, with each individual, then it constitutes cultural invasion, cultural oppression, whatever our good intentions. That would be my take.
Yeah, great. So now I get to pick one.
That's fun.
Yeah, and there's a code to this. There's a code to this as well, because the bigger the paper, the longer the quote. So there's a system to this madness. I'll pick one here in the middle. Okay. This is like a Paulo Freire Christmas almost. Unwrapping these different quotes from his work. Okay. It is not the unloved who initiate disaffection, but those who cannot love because they love only themselves. And that's also from the Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Can you read it again?
Yes, yeah, should I read it again? It is not the unloved who initiate disaffection, but those who cannot love because they love only themselves. That's a really interesting piece, because you could translate it maybe and summarize it into that: what stands in the way of love as a first step for meaningful change or for creating vibrant and positive communities, whether it's an educational community or a community in a more people living together sense. And I think from my experience within the university, I wouldn't say it's a majority of people, but there's a very distinct majority of people that have a high regard of themselves. And a lot of people, I think, in that minority have this love only of themselves. But a lot of people, I think, also in the academic context, they learn how to tone it down and to translate this into a more human behavior. But I think at the core, they only love themselves, which then, as the quote says, that stands in the way of all of this.
This is a dialogue, isn't it?
Yeah, this is interesting.
Can we do it that we can also comment our reflections?
Yeah, sure. I didn't have that much to say. You perfectly captured it.
No, I would say you had your particular way to say what you needed to say. So don't invalidate. No. Valuable. What I thought, remembering that Paulo Freire was a Catholic. He was, you could say, left Catholic, like the former Pope clearly was. And then is this reference to Jesus' life, love thy neighbor like yourself. Found a connection there. And then why would people don't love themselves? Well, if people were not loved because they were bombed, because they were killed, because they were oppressed, because they were not respected, they were not attended, then it was difficult for these children to love themselves. Or compensatory, if you think in Freudian terms, you love yourself too much, then you are too narcissistic. And if you are too narcissistic, you are lacking empathy. And if you lack empathy, you cannot begin to dialogue and liberate yourself and other people. That would be like a fast reflection to your reflection.
Yep. Lots more we can say on that, but please go ahead and pick another one.
I'll take a short one.
Yeah, as I said, there's a lot of them. So
Take a short. No.
Yeah, I think that's a medium long one.
Okay. Again, from Pedagogy of the Oppressed. You know, many people think that this was the first book that the first book that I used in teaching in Peru was Extension or Communication, which is a fascinating book. But now, back to Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I remember it was bloody difficult to read the book. Some people tried to translate it because it was too difficult. Now, the quote: manipulation, sloganizing, depositing, regimentation, and prescription cannot be components of revolutionary praxis, precisely because they are the components of the praxis of domination. Wow. So, yesterday there was a lecture that I listened to by a scholar, American, on genocide. And he presented the case of Pol Pot, Khmer Rouge, in Cambodia. So he did the analysis and pretty much making clear that what Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot did was to manipulate, sloganize, depositing, like bank education, depositing, means instructing. The analogy that Pol Pot used was like when you work with iron, that you pound the head instead of dialoguing in a Socratic way, you hammer ideas into the mind. Regimentation, very much like a pyramid of terror, very regimented, very categorized, and very prescriptive, in the sense that we are the good guys, and because we're the good guys, we have license to murder about 2 million Cambodians. Yes. So it cannot be, but this was presented as a revolutionary process. And in this way, Pol Pot and Khmer Rouge have damaged the image of the left and socialism and revolutionary praxis in the world, because they are illustrations of the praxis of domination. And just to finish my quote, one of these big professors, I will give his name, but maybe Daniel can guess, in his very special way to talk, he didn't miss the opportunity to raise the question, what about Gaza? Is Gaza genocide? And of course, the mood in the room, didn't contest. But the little Freire in my mind, Pepe Grillo, said, should we ask if there are elements of genocide in Hamas constitution, prescriptive, that I found very close to Khmer Mesh, and what they did on October 7. Could that be also illustrations of genocide? But I wasn't given the chance to raise that question. It would have been a bit provocative. But then pedagogy of the oppressed, it's a pedagogy of liberation. It's a pedagogy of freedom, of precisely think what you think, and dare to say it, not when you're surrounded by ye-sayers saying what is populist and popular to say. So, but I didn't give the name. You can guess who.
Yeah, and my very short comment to all of this is also, when you talk about genocide, it's a formal war crime, and there's a formal international legal process that usually then, at least for the countries that have signed up, is processed in The Hague and the Netherlands. So, but whether you call it a genocide or not, it might matter in public opinion, but for the people being damaged or harmed or killed, these kind of distinctions doesn't matter in the here and now, but it matters in the reconciliation, if there is any reconciliation afterwards. But it also matters in the way of justice, of which we talked about earlier. If there's going to be, and also having justice after a war as a basis for peace. Because if you don't come to the justice aspect of it, you're not going to come towards maybe some kind of reconciliation. But reconciliation is not only, I wouldn't say that that's a thing that somebody else from the outside can impose on anybody else. That has to be a very internal process.
Wow. I would comment on that. Yesterday, it was exactly what the scholar said, Daniel, what you just said. He said, why is this focus on genocide, not on crimes against humanity, which is taken not just in Gaza, all over the place, but it's a focus, let's say, now on Israel and Palestine. And the media is part of that. But in a way, this focus, it's a kind of manipulation. It's kind of sloganizing. It's a way not to discuss the depth of the situation, which is it's people dying, people being killed. And yes, we know that who are the perpetrators in the case of Israel, but for some strange reason, it's not mentioned the perpetration of Hamas. It's ignored selectively. So I find this very manipulative, very sloganizing, and very much a praxis of domination in the name of whatever.
Okay. I'm going to pick another one.
I'm not gaining popular votes.
No, but it's, yeah. And that whole topic is sometimes difficult to discuss. But as I said earlier, it's a conversation maybe that should be had with people that have some kind of experience or some kind of history within that geographical space. Okay, so the next one, I got a long one, and guess what? It's from the Pedagogy of the Oppressed. There are quotes from other books, I know that by cutting it up beforehand. So, okay. Those truly committed to liberation must reject the banking concept in its entirety, adopting instead a concept of women and men as conscious beings and consciousness as consciousness intent upon the world.
Again.
I'm going to read that again because it's, yeah. Those truly committed to liberation must reject the banking concept in its entirety, adopting instead a concept of women and men as conscious beings and consciousness as consciousness intent upon the world. So this is pretty...
Consciousness intended?
An intent upon the world. So this is a fairly philosophical statement. Okay, if we start from the beginning and try to pick this apart then. Okay, so liberation is in the title of our podcast. So we're on the side of liberation. And the banking concept is basically this traditional education where you just deposit knowledge into the learners or the students. So we reject that because we think that education can be done in a different way, which is much better, but also aims towards liberation. Okay, so instead of banking education, the banking concept, we have to adopt a different way of seeing people basically as conscious beings, not something you just deposit things in. And then the consciousness within those people has to be seen as consciousness intent upon the world, which I don't to 100% understand. But I guess there's some form of agency in there. Yeah.
I think it's a great first reflection. I think the translation to English, I have the translation, is not very good. So something is lost in translation there. My take on that, on the word, it is conscientization is not for the sake of being an erudite, of just being myself, understanding, and stays with me. It's seen as a process that invites other people to become conscious, not to become not thinking. It's liberating in the sense that it invites, it provokes this kind of awareness. And then if the awareness becomes viral, it becomes collective, then, like for example, the work of the encyclopedies before the French Revolution, they created a space of debate saying, if God wants kings to rule, how come they are ruling so bad? How come the filthy rich and the poor are poor? Things like how come the royal family in the UK invites, this Buffon that they have today for president in the United States. I'm being a bit political now. So was Freire. So the idea is to spread, provoke, invite, induce, not impose consciousness. So it becomes a collective, liberating, and then powerfully transforming force.
I think I get it now as well, because you talked earlier about the small book you showed about medvetandegörande pedagogik, consciousness making pedagogics. So maybe it's much simpler. Maybe it's not philosophical at all. Maybe it's very practical in the sense that
it's both. Can be both.
Yeah, people. You need to organize education in a way that makes people conscious of the world they live in and that they have agency in that world. Maybe it's that simple. So we're going to continue a couple of more rounds and we'll see what we get.
I remember Freire was kind of forbidden in Cuba because he was too voluntaristic, too much about autonomy, personal autonomy. So they saw him as too Maoistic at the time that Cuba was very dependent on the Soviet Union. But then they wanted to give him the Professor Emeritus. The year he died, he couldn't go to Cuba. He was given it posthumously. That's a short one. Mm-hmm. There is no teaching without learning. Yeah.
And which book is it from? Are we still in the
Pedagogy of Freedom?
Oh, okay.
Yes. And it's interesting, freedom. Freedom seems to be a flag belonging to the right. You know, freedom is I do what I want. Freedom is to choose people like Musk, even he buys your vote. Freedom is the freedom to vote for Trump, even though people are intimidated or, district gerrymandering not to vote. No. Freire was speaking of freedom in terms of responsibility. We are free to understand in order to be responsible for what we do with this understanding. So that's one part of it. And what he was saying basically is, when you teach, you learn. When you learn, you teach.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to pick another one. Yeah, this one is also short. And now we are in another book, Learning to Question. Learning to Question. So I don't know that book, but okay, it's short. The word is not my invention. It is you who make it. So the word is not my invention. It is you who make it. Yeah, that's also a heavy quote. A heavy quote. Do you want to read it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it goes back to maybe what we've been talking about, agency and being able to learn how to influence the world, and also that agency is a fancy word that you have some kind of ownership or it's part of you. So yeah.
So what makes the word of a child so charming, so fresh? It's those that are parents and grandparents. It's so fascinating to see when a child uses words in their own way. Eventually, they're educated, quote unquote, to use the word the way it's conventional. But I can remember something funny. My eldest daughter, Katerina, she has heard a lot when you sneeze, people say, bless you. So when I burped, she told me, burp you. So this is this sensitivity to, how words come into being. Mm-hmm. And I think children are recreating words and language and culture.
Yeah. And also in academia, we talk a lot and people write a lot, and you read a lot, which is all words. So maybe it goes back to that thing of owning the process and feel like you are the one driving the process, even as a student then. Okay, do you want to pick another one? Or do you want to say something more?
Learning to question, it's like in itself a line.
Mm-hmm.
Is the pedagogy of the question.
Mm-hmm.
Freire took this from Socrates, from the maeutic method. Basically, all he's doing is questioning. So you say, God created the world. Why? How do you know? And in that process, inviting the user of words to question the words and the meaning implicit in the wording of the world. So it's a lot in this learning to question and the pedagogy of the question, not so much of the answer. Because if I give you the answers, I'm inhibiting your chance to provide your answer. Recipes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's my turn. This is fun.
Yeah, we can go on for 10 hours and we'll go through this.
It's a big one. No, but it's a different book. The book is Education for Critical Consciousness. So it's not just consciousness, but critical. Some people think that critical is to just criticize, be negative. It's more than that. So, quote. My daughter will say burp you. Just as it is important in Latin America to discuss ideas that come from North America, I think it is interesting for North Americans to discuss ideas that come from Latin America or Africa and do not insert themselves into capitalist interest. Yes. So, in the 60s, 70s, there was a discussion in the media world about creating a new international information communication order because the world was invaded in a globalized world by ideas and news coming from North America. So when I was living in Santa Barbara, California, in the whole year I read one paragraph about one Peruvian man beating his wife because his football team, his soccer team, failed. That's the whole news in a year. I was reading the newspaper every day. So the imbalance. So basically he's saying there is some imbalance and some lack of very unequal flow of ideas where automatically in most texts in graduate schools in Latin America, in Africa, even in Sweden, I might dare say, they are from America's Academy or Anglo Academy. In the past was German Academy. So basically saying, let's address this inequality. Let's make the flow more equal. And then he critically inserts capitalist interest. Why? Because what is the capital of the capitalist world? Which is the country most associated with capitalism and capitalism interest, profit interest, the profits of the 1%, not of the 99%. This was a little bit categorized and stereotyped. But basically saying that the ideas that are valuable, that not only not correspond, but can question critically what is problematic with capitalism that has brought us in the last 500 years of colonial capitalism, industrialism, neo-colonialism, globalism, to the stage we are today with a climate catastrophe, with conflicts, with wars, with the gap between rich and poor growing fast and eroding democracy.
Yeah, a very short edition from me.
Was it too long?
No, that's good. I think in the CEMUS context of our courses, I think it's even broader than the quote, in the sense that we, in our courses, try to bring in different voices, different experiences, different perspectives on the issues. But it's also that there's a lot of different perspectives, even in the local sense of Uppsala or in Sweden, that are not part of the conversation around sustainability or climate, for example. But then again, of course, there's a rich array of different perspectives and people and experiences out there in the world that could be much more integrated into the education and also shared with the students, because also the students come from all over the world. So they also have their own experiences and also their own voices that they can bring into the conversation. So, yep.
I've tasted that. I've been student to taste how it goes, and it's very participatory, culturally very diverse, rich.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we are back to the pedagogy of the oppressed. A not so long quote. The more radical the person is, the more fully he or she enters into reality, so that, knowing it better, he or she can transform it. I'm going to read that again. The more radical the person is...
Slowly.
Yeah, slower. The more radical the person is, the more fully he or she enters into reality, so that, knowing it better, he or she can transform it. So I think this is similar to the other quote. And maybe it's a translation, as you say, that it's a bit quirky, but maybe this is also fairly simple in the way that the more radical you are or keen to change the world, if we translate radical to that, the more you immerse yourself or are part of the world, in a sense, the reality. And by knowing it better, knowing the world, being part of the world and experience it, you are better equipped to transform or change it.
Great.
I think there's something in the Freire quote here that it's like, it sounds like it's a deep philosophical reflection about something, but if you translate it, it's a very practical, hands-on, like step-by-step kind of recommendation almost.
He was very much into theorizing and praxis. And being an agricultural engineer in my background, radical comes from roots. So basically, what he's saying is the more rooted in understanding you are, I mean, deep, the roots go deep, deep, deep into the soil. And that gives you a solid base to look at the world in a way that you can change it from the soil up, from the grassroots up, because it's not the flowers. It's in a way you could be radical without being violent, like Pol Pot. He was radical in the wrong way because he tried to transform from the top, over-imposing a doctrine, a dogma, a sect.
But it could also be said that it's more of a reactionary. I mean, Pol Pot was reactionary and also a mix of reactionary and conservative. So maybe it wasn't radicalism in that sense. But the word can be used very differently.
He was claiming to be radical and to be revolutionary, but Freire was very much a grassroots, down up.
Yeah, it's a bottom up.
Bottom up, not top down. So I think there is a lot in it. So it's both, it's philosophical, it's deep, and at the same time, it's it's practical. And one thing that people criticize about theology of liberation, like Gustavo Gutierrez or Leonardo Boff, that they were Marxists, making it a sloganized, categorized body. It's, you don't say those things today. They are not fashionable. They are not goody. But Freire read Marx, and in that Pedagogy to Press or critical consciousness, basically what he's saying is, let's think clearly. Let's try to separate the straw from the wheat, from the seed. Let's make sense. Let's not just repeat trite knowledge, conventional knowledge. So in this sense, it's very much lively.
Okay, this is fun, but should we do one more? And then our kind of hour is up. So it's your turn, I think. If you want to do one more, and then I'll do one more, and then, yeah.
Small one. Oh. I'm an educator who thinks globally. Various sources. Is that from Freire? I don't know. But could be Freire. Yeah, I can see myself as a learner, educator, both. I think globally and try to apply it locally. So it's glocally, not just globally. And then various sources. Maybe because to think, I try to fit my thinking by reading various sources, even if they contradict my views, even they challenge my views. To think globally, it's to not only be tolerant, to accept difference, but to see if I can learn something even from my enemy, from people thinking totally different from my views. And that can be painful because you need to rethink your thoughts. And it's a kind of laziness, So I think it's very important today because I see more and more people being intolerant with people thinking otherwise. I know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the world today, very different from Freire's world, because I think also thinking globally now is to also be part of a landscape of disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, and all sorts of media that have a different speed than on Freire's time. So thinking globally today is much more of a challenge. Both emotionally, but also intellectually, I would say.
It is tiring. Mm-hmm. It is very tiring. We need to have a balance and then support each other and find people where you can think and speak your mind freely without being jumped with a hammer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, final quote. We are back now to Pedagogy of the Oppressed, not surprisingly. Okay. Dialogue requires an intense faith in humankind. Faith in their power to make and remake, to create and recreate. Faith in their vocation to be more fully human. That's a beautiful quote.
Read it again.
Dialogue requires an intense faith in humankind, faith in their power to make and remake, to create and recreate, faith in their vocation to be more fully human. For this, or in this quote, I think it's much more direct. For me, it's if you don't have a kind of stupid overbelief in human beings to be good and to do things in the world, then this whole project, if you don't have that kind of starting point, you can't really do anything with education, or you can't do anything in the world. You can do things maybe for yourself. But if human beings are super beings in the right contexts, and then maybe in the right educational contexts and communities, if you don't believe that, then we're not going to make it. But it's always been, for me at least, less of a rational conviction, or it's a combination of a rational and kind of experience-based and emotional conviction that human beings in the right situations are amazing. And it's not only humans then, it's the whole world, the whole cosmos and the whole universe is amazing with all its darkness and all its evils.
If there is the promise of humanization in the way Teilhard de Chardin would put it, he was a paleontologist and a Jesuit, saying that we are slowly, in cosmic terms, progressing towards being fully human, humanization. And I think Freire was accused by some for being an utopian, assuming that to be utopian is to be a dreamer, and to be a dreamer is not to be a realist. So-called realist dismiss utopian thinking, tend to be cynic, pessimistic, saying like this view, homo homini lupus, man is the wolf of men, the competitive view that we are competing with each other. And if you compete with each other, it's very difficult to trust each other, to love each other, to listen to each other. So dialogue, and we actually published this special issue that includes a chapter on dialogue from Erik Lindholt, our Swedish colleague and friend, who passed recently a few years ago. And I never met somebody that believed so much that you could dialogue with anyone, even people not wanting to dialogue. So there is a humbleness in this view that I know a little bit, you know a little bit, and through dialogue we can learn from each other. But if I have the whole truth, why bother to discuss with you? You take it or leave it. So I think it's a very beautiful way to finish this game, this daring, this exploratory, open experiment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we haven't named it yet, but it's something along the lines of a Freire quote game or something like that. It's not a very fancy. We should think of a name. Maybe we can find the name until the release of the episode, and then we can give the episode that name. I think that's everything for today. This was very fun.
A question about language.
Yep.
If we want people to listen to it in Portuguese, in Spanish.
Yep. I can put those instructions, also a link.
For different languages.
Yep. So there's a setting you can do in YouTube and getting different languages. You get text at the bottom. In a couple of years, we'll be speaking all sorts of languages, I guess, with AI and other things that can adapt the video to your language.
With the chip,
yeah, it's a dystopian. You will understand everything we say, but it's very dystopian. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. It was really fun.
Yeah. This was fun, as usual.
Yeah.
This is
Thank you for preparing the ground.
Yeah, that was easy. It's like, okay, thanks.